yourself, the topics that you have suggested, and the other sessions that you've come in. It just expands the discussion. I mean, and more people come in, more discussion. Of course, people don't know that all panelists can come into all and are invited for all sessions. That's a different thing. Because the thing is that all my earlier that symposium and all that I've done is basically been speaker and me. And like you were also sitting here, the other person doesn't get a chance normally. So this why should we sit here? Why not just watch it on YouTube? So
Exactly.
that's what's happened. So thank you very
That's why
much
I
for.
asked you before the session, but okay, I understand now that I can watch it afterwards. Well, thank you
So,
anyway.
so thank you. The only thing, Nandina, before you tell us about yourself, was what I was, or what I made you do with Bernie's is everything. Also, you have to tell us about the conference, because I be my saying the same thing over and over again. I think maybe people will get tired of my repetition of the thing. So, what for you? What does they mean? I mean, conference mean to you? Something on that.
Okay, so I will present the Mediator Vikram. I just got to know him, and I found out that he had put together a program and a conference where many mediators are coming together and discussing different topics. And I thought that was interesting. So why not participate? And this is why I'm participating. So thank you for having me, Vikram.
So thank you, Minina, for being part of it. 18th May to 30th June. Please watch the recordings. Just search for Mediator Vikram on YouTube, or you can go to mediatorvikram.com. You'll find the links there. So that's what it is. So Nina, the topic that you have suggested and put out is restorative practices in schools. So you have to tell us about yourself and then the topic, and I'll come in whenever you want me to come in. Please.
Okay, so my name is Nina, and I'm connecting from Sweden. I'm a mediator, and I have been a problem solver for over 30 years, dealing with a lot of people and a lot of different issues. And despite that, I really like people, even if I find myself difficult at times. So I still like to interact with people. And I like also when it's complicated, because I think there is always a solution. It might take more time or less time, but I think it's possible. And why I picked this subject, restorative practice in schools, it was because when I had my education in mediation, we had a fantastic teacher, Michelle Stowe, and she had this subject, restorative practices in schools. And I just picked that course because I needed one more course. But eventually this course maybe is one of the courses which really have stayed with me. And I cannot forget it. I need to develop it, and I need to know more about it. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I'm thinking a lot about this subject.
Perfect. So you have to take us through the subject, what all it covers, everything. It's your show. I'm only coming later when you've taken us through this.
Okay. So all of those dialogue models, or many people say that they are coming from indigenous people. And yeah, I think that's the fact. And then it developed to restorative justice and mediation and things like that. But restorative practices, in my view, is just something you can use everywhere. It's something you can use in your family, or something you can use in school, something you can use in your workplace, to have a better dialogue with people, and to meet the differences, and to not necessarily agree, but to listen to each other. So I think that's why I like the subject. It creates respect, but also a listening culture, where it's okay to be me and it's okay to be you, and we can still discuss even if we don't agree. So I like that. And the major thing is how we speak with people. Do we speak with them, or for them, or to them, or do we not speak to them at all? So the idea with this is coming from the social discipline window, adapted by Paul McCall and Ted Wachtel, I think it is. And this is the difference between control on one part and limit setting, discipline, and on the other hand, support, which is encouragement and nurture. And it has to be some balance here. And in schools, I think that is very important, because if we can inspire young people to learn some conflict resolution and to learn to how to deal with themselves in an early age, I think our whole society could, win something from that. So what is then restorative practice? I was looking through some definitions yesterday, and I found one that was from something called the Conflict Center, and I will read it. It said, restorative practice is a process by which an individual acknowledges wrongdoing, takes steps to repair harm, and is welcomed back into the school community. This fosters a culture that elevates dialogue and values relationships. And then I found another one from my former teacher, Michelle Stowe. And it's her and some person named Matthews from 2016. And it says, restorative practice is a value-based way of being. It aims to actively promote relationships, respond to harm, and connects us to our best selves and to one another. So my understanding from both of those definitions is that it's all about relationships. And this is what I connect back to the previous session with Bernard Mayer, because he also related back to, you cannot just get into a new country and help them with an issue. It takes the building of relationships to start to really trust each other, understand each other, to be able to discuss the difficult questions. So that's one part of it. For me, restorative practice is a way of engaging people positively in their own lives, and then from an early age, if it's possible, and giving them the possibility to live side by side with others in a way where everyone can develop from their own starting point, because we are all unique. And it's important. You think that three siblings in the same family have had the same upbringing, but that's not true, because they had different personalities and there were different occasions in their life. And so they are still unique, even if they are brought up from the same parents. And I have used, maybe I will ask you, what do you think about the definitions there? What do you think restorative practice is?
No, I'm okay. I mean, in the sense, look, we have to, of course, look at restoring things. So, of course, restoring relationships and all that. But for me, I'll tell you, when I look at it, I also want to go back to restoring values. Now, restoring that value system or the values, I don't know whether are we working on that or not, or are we just working on that particular incident and restoring things back to the relationship, back to that, or are we looking at the larger restoring the value system in the community or whatever? I mean, is that going to be one part of it?
Yes, I think so. But then also it's important to understand whose values then.
Yeah.
Because as we also spoke about in the previous session, I mean, for example, my country, Sweden, we had a setting maybe of values that you think, who is a Swede? But we have also a lot of other different cultures, nationalities, people from so many parts of the world in Sweden, and many of those, they do not look what we thought originally a Swede was looking like, but they are still Swedes because they are born here and things like that. So I think the community has one way or another to agree on what are the values, the values that we share together to create this how to live in a good way together.
Because I still feel that do we think maybe we should have our discussions on, is there, I'm sure our shared values are across the world, and I think those stay the same in whatever community, whatever location, everything. So maybe those are what we should be looking at. And then when you look at in the schools, you're only looking at that aspect, and then there is, of course, there could be some cultural part of it that's of course unique maybe to that particular place. And then we can't, of course, that also, like I was saying, cultural is also one too general a thing, because there is so much diversity in every little part of maybe Sweden also now is not the Sweden that you would have maybe grown up in. Every part must have become diverse now to say, so now this is the culture of this particular region of Sweden also might not have remained the same. So maybe that part of it we always will be debatable, but I'm sure there are some basic human values that stay the same across the board, across the country, across the world. So, do you think that is there or not?
I think that's the human touch, which Bana was talking about, how we meet each other and how we can be authentic with each other, and how we can really listen to each other's needs, but also how we can agree on what is okay and not okay. Because to live together in peace, we also need to have some different rules, or at least respect how to say ourselves in ways. But I think restorative practices are fostering that listening. And of course, it's difficult. Yeah, of course, because the world is looking like it is, but still it starts with each and every one of us. And if we are not that, because I think people today, they get angry very fast. And there is a lot of misunderstandings and things like that. So if we could be a little bit more patient, if we could learn to be a bit more patient and not just judge directly, but instead try to understand and be curious and say, okay, I'm not sure I understand fully. Could you explain to me more about this? Because I really want to understand. So could you help me with that? And I think the restorative practices in schools would be a very nice way of starting such development in a person. And I have experiences as a trainer, for example, and I have been using a lot of so-called student-centered or participatory learning, student-centered learning or participatory learning, which is I, as a trainer, I take a step back, and maybe I have to go through a subject. Then I do that like the first 5-10 minutes. And after that, I deliver group works or whatever. And my students or the participants, they have to find out kind of their own problems, so it connects with them. And then try to figure out how to solve it. And then go through the work, and then make a presentation. And then the rest of the class, if we call it the class or the group, they first of all will have to contribute. Do they want to add something? And I, as a trainer, only in the last part, I can, because I check the box. Okay, what have they mentioned? They have mentioned this and that and this and that, because of course there is a lesson plan. But the idea is that they shall feel the inspiration and be encouraged to search for knowledge themselves. And I like that way very much. And this is also what I think is the idea with the restorative practices for very young people in a school as well, at both primary schools and secondary schools. And that, for me, it builds like a dignity, and it builds self-confidence. From my own school time, I remember we had some persons in my class, and they were always noisy, and they couldn't continue to have the lesson. They were told to get outside, and they could not come back again. And after a while, they have a kind of stamp, like, these people are difficult. And nobody really, maybe they tried to listen, but I'm not sure if they did it in the way which I mean when I talk about the restorative practices. Because, for example, it's very easy as a teacher to think that you are right, because you have more education, you have more years in life, you have more experience, things like that. So it's very easy to fall into a place where you say, why did you do this? I want you to do this and that. But with the restorative practices, there are some questions, and you can find them all over the internet. For example, the first question is, what happened? And then we wait for the answer. And if they are a bit shy and they're a bit unused to tell about this, because usually the judgments are coming so fast, so people are just trying to defend themselves. But with this question, the meaning is to open up a bit and see what happened from your perspective, what was happening. And then after that, what were you thinking at the time? And then what have you thought about it since? And who has been affected by what you have done and how? And how could things been done differently? Was there a possibility for something else to happen that you didn't think about? And what do you think you need to do to make things right? So when you use those questions, you give to the persons involved, both maybe the one that was more wrongdoing, if we should use that word, than the other, or because maybe the wrongdoer was not thinking that what he or she did was wrong, but with certain eyes, we might judge and say, oh, maybe this one did more wrong than the other one, which we try to avoid with those questions. But you understand, everybody can tell from their own perspective what happened and why. So what do you think about that?
I think what you just said about whether to even say that someone was wrong and the other was right, it'll go back to that value system. It'll go back to that. So somewhere there has to be some universal understanding, maybe, because you'll be gauging something on an action which for that person, I'm giving some example. I'm not saying in particular example that you might be looking at. I'm just saying that in some examples that might become something that we would need to look at. I mean, it won't be as easy as I think we might want to make it, because finally that whole restorative practice, you'll have to tell me how, of course, they're doing it. But if these children are doing it within themselves, that's one thing. Or we have a teacher who's part of that. How does that function? Or do they get an external person in? So in that kind of a situation, are you gauging or judging the children on some aspect which for them is not something that is a wrongdoing? And you bringing certain moral standards of yours into a situation where maybe it's too early for them also, and sometimes your understanding of their situation or their upbringing or thought process might not be there. I'm just putting out these thoughts. I'm not saying that all that. You will of course tell me if that makes sense in the entire thing. So I don't know how you look at it. Do you look at it from this perspective?
No, but the idea for me is that everybody can have their say, because it might be that we are all, how to say, more tired one day than another. And then maybe we have a less ability to concentrate, or more easy to get angry, or I mean, there is a reason for behavior. This is what I think myself. I try to look for that reason, or it can be an explanation, and maybe it's maybe, how to say, it's not justifying the behavior, but when you have an explanation, there is also a possibility for that person to reflect on how that happened. So I think we, as I said in another session, that sometimes we are not even coming to an agreement, but the ability and the possibility to look at things from different angles is enough many times.
Yeah, basically, I think finally restorative practice more on the aspect of being able to understand from the other person's perspective, and not get out of your own, and then look at it further. Then is it something that you feel that something was not done in the right way, and then feel that apologetic, or whatever word, feel bad, whatever word you want to use, from within. So I think that happening within, I mean, with the children, how does that work? I mean, I think might be a little easier. Do you think it's easier for them to feel from within when they listen to someone else and they hear them tell their side of the story, how they looked at the incident? How does that work? I mean, what has your experience been with children?
I think in a school, of course, you can not only transform the children, you have also to transform all the teachers and the principal, and everybody has to buy this system, because you have to implement such a system. But the good thing with such a system is, for example, that you name emotions, things that in our rational societies you never talk about. This is something that we all have, but we choose to think that we are rational people, and we don't need to talk about these kind of difficult or emotional things. But I think we all know how many times we had to swallow something that we really wanted to say because it was not appropriate to say it. But with these kind of methods, it's okay to say, this morning I'm sad, this morning I'm angry, and then it's not, you don't need to be afraid of your feelings, because it's something that everybody has. And when it's coming to how to deal with these kind of things in a classroom, for example, as I said, I'm not an expert. I just got so many impressions from this course that I had. So it have lived with me, and it has developed inside me. I have used it, but not with small kids, but with adult participants. So you can use it not only with small kids, but oftentimes you have you put people in a circle, and you need to have a facilitator then that is trying to be, I mean, as we spoke also in the previous, neutral and impartial, and trying to, everybody has to have the same time for saying something. Everybody has to have an opportunity to say something. And for that, you can have a talking piece, especially when you deal with kids, but also in adult groups. I have been in adult groups myself, where we had a stone or something. And that fosters this active listening and the ability to not interrupt people when they are talking, so they can tell their whole story and it's all fine. And the next round you can decide, okay, now we will say 3 words, or I mean, you are able to steer the process in a positive way as well. But the idea is that everybody can say what they want, and that everybody has to listen. And in a circle, nobody can, avoid the process, because everybody is looking towards each other. And as it is a circle, it connects people already sitting in that circle. So I like that process very much.
The important thing is to be able to give them that safe space when they know they won't be judged. I think that's the first point. How do you do that? To be able to create that atmosphere, because definitely you are talking about children and to children who sometimes can be insensitive to each other. Sometimes it does happen. So how do you handle that aspect of it, I think might be something which we have to, I think, what experiences you've had or what you heard or read. So how do you work on that?
So as I said, I have not been working in school, so maybe I could have chosen this subject, restorative practices in general, but I have trained adult people. And how I dealt with that in those classes, it was to be very interested in usually we had 14 people in this kind of trainings. And it's to connect with them as early as possible, to ask them about their interests. I mean, you have some kind of icebreakers in the beginning, where they will share something about themselves. So I try to remember that and to connect to that later. And also, of course, you need some kind of authority, but not in a negative way, but you need to keep it together in a way. It's difficult to explain exactly what I'm doing there. But I have experienced, other people can say if they don't agree, but usually I manage to connect quite well in a fast manner. And many of those trainings, there was, 2 different professions, and there were some conflicts between them. So I also experienced that when there is a conflict in the air, people were not learning anything. So I had to put them in a circle to be able to clear the air in a way, but also to make people, I put them like in every other. Put yourselves in the circle, every other, and then discuss 2 and 2, for example, I made once. And I said, discuss 2 and 2, every unfairness that you can find. So they started to discuss. And then after a while, I just said, okay, are you finished with that? And they said, yes. And then I said, okay, now the next round, we will talk about, I will encourage you all to say something that you're doing in your everyday job, which which is helpful for a positive future. And then everybody said wonderful things. And after that, they were ready to learn. So in a way, you have to connect people. And it's difficult to say how, because every group is different as well. But I found that it was sometimes magic. Sometimes it was very difficult. And in one class, they didn't want to listen to us at all. So we tried everything that we could and no response. So in the end, we put the chairs in the middle of the class and we said, okay, now in an authentic way, okay, we tried everything we know. Now we have no more, ideas. So we just put ourselves here and you can ask any question you want. And there were like silence for 5 minutes. And then one person said, okay, why are you here? And what, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, we told our life stories, why we had at work and things like that. And then, yeah, so in a way, people want to know who you are. And with those restorative questions, you can always open up. And I like that.
But now, Nina, we have to go one step ahead. Of course, restorative practices in school. Then on the other end, mediation. How do we fit in that into the process in a way? Of course, like I said, the mediator mindset, the role of the mediator. So does that come out from those? I mean, of course, like you said, you haven't worked in the schools, but I'm thinking that how do we, I mean, are we able to get some people, some children out there who can actually take a lead in it? Do they, I mean, that, how does that work? If you've done it outside, of course, you would have seen that, but with the children, how do we do that?
We had a study visit at the primary school and the secondary school, and I was studying in Ireland. And at that primary school, there were kids from 5 years old till 12 years old. And the eldest ones, the 10, 11th, and 12-year-olds, they had the opportunity to apply for a job as like peer, what was it? Peer supporter, some kind. I don't remember the exact name. And they applied, and then they had an interview, like a job interview, why they really wanted this job and why they thought it was important, things like that. And then those kids had, I think they had a special, some vest or something in the schoolyard, and they managed to solve very, very many of the small conflicts that appeared. And of course, they had a backup if it was too difficult, so they could call for a teacher. But they taught these kids or these peer supporters some conflict resolution models and ideas. And the funny thing was that when we were there, my whole class were there, and we were just sitting around the table, and those kids were standing around us, and they had gained so much wisdom. And I was thinking, okay, so if you can teach young people 10 to 12 years old conflict resolution in this way, and we do not manage that in our own working places, then this concept is very interesting.
Well, I'm telling you that the whole idea for me is that those children who can actually facilitate that process, those children have to come out, because one is that you just tell them you are doing this, and of course you get the chance to speak, and I mean there's a simplified version of it. But actually to be able to have children in, I mean, handling the process, and of course those children who can actually facilitate that process, that's what I want to develop. Because one is on the nice thing, be good human beings and all, which you've heard me, I think, say that all the time. I keep saying that. That's very nice. I mean, conflict coaching and all that will happen. But to able to bring out those children who can actually facilitate these processes, and the mediator mindset is what I talk about. Is that happening or not? I mean, that's, for me, that's the important step, because once these children are identified, then if they come out into the mediation world and they take it up as something that they will want to do. So that coming up is the important part.
Yeah, I think so, because I think the kids would have that mediator mindset, but it was unconscious. They applied for this kind of job in the school because they thought it was interesting. And also they had the ability to solve all those conflicts between the friends at the schoolyard, because you cannot only do that if you're not a trusted person, or you don't have how to say, the right approach, it will be very difficult to assist people. I don't say help people solving their problems, but assist people in solving problems. And for me, what I heard that day was that it was very effective and it was very successful. And when we visited that secondary school, the kids were then from 12 to 18 or 13 to 18 years old. And then because they had learned facilitation already, or they took some imprints from the other school, and they were also trained, if a conflict appeared or something that they disagreed with, they said, okay, let's have a circle. And then they facilitated themselves to solve that problem. So that was very interesting. And thinking if we could have that in our working places, that would have been great. But people have very difficulty to say I did something wrong, or because we are, I don't know, we are afraid of being wrongdoers in a way. But we all do mistakes. I mean, without mistakes, how could we learn anything? So if we were a little bit more open and understood and could spread that it's human to make a mistake. And it doesn't mean that we are stupid or not smart or doesn't have any knowledge or things like that, which we usually connect it with. I mean, we are still smart. It's just we made a mistake. We misunderstood something. That's normal.
But what age do children actually reach that point? I mean, is there, because normally people talk about the older children, but at what age does a child have that in them to facilitate these conversations, to be able to get people to connect, and then of course the healing, if that healing has to happen, whether to do that? Is there, you think there is a certain age when that happens, or is it something which happens at whatever age?
I don't know enough about child psychology or anything, but at that school they had picked the idea that 10 to 12 years old children, they could do this to a certain limit, and it seemed to be working well. And of course I was only there one day, but we all were like amazed, really. It was a fantastic day, and that feeling is still living with me, because it was, and of course the whole school was, for example, there was a bench, and said, next time you drink tea, take somebody that you don't know with you. These kind of messages was also all over the school. So it was a very, how do you say, allowing environment.
But I'm just thinking that when we say catch them young,
Mm-hmm.
how young do we catch them, is because it's important sometimes, because maybe there is that, I keep saying that natural ability, but does over time, I mean, if you don't take that out at a younger age and actually put it out as a quality. So someone who does this activity of connecting people and can actually handle this process. So, I mean, if you don't, maybe, I mean, if you haven't picked them up as young as you should, are you actually are they getting influenced, and are they moving away from something that they could have done very well at a much younger age and developed at a younger age? We have to, I'm not saying there isn't any answer. I mean, of course we don't have maybe the answer right now, but I think we should think about it, because I feel that they have it when they're very young. Some people, some have it, they don't have it, kind of thing. So if they have it, can we hone that at a much younger age, give them the opportunity where they are right from the beginning, whatever class, they're actually just facilitating conversations. I mean, sometimes it doesn't, I mean, it's just that restorative practices normally is about the fact that, okay, I did this wrong, this something wrong, and now I mean, I should not have done it, or those kind of things that happen. But just the facilitation of conversation in general, that should also be looked at as an art form. So
yeah, I agree with you. It's an art.
whether that is looked at as an art or not, also I don't know whether society understands that as an art. I don't know how you look at it.
Yeah, but we live in a certain society which, how to say, it's very based on right and wrong. And when somebody did something wrong, it's not only the thing that they are doing wrong, it's like now they are wrong. And those restorative practices are taking that away, because it's separating the person from the problem. And that's the same in mediation. So this is a kind of, how to say, base for mediation maybe, but just what I think, it would be so beneficial if we gave kids the ability to learn this already from the start, it would save us a lot of problems later. That's what I think. So if everybody can tell their story from their perspective, and if we can encourage people to listen to each other, or they can understand why that is important themselves, because it doesn't matter if we are telling them, they need to feel it and understand it and gain something from it, and then they will understand. So this is why it needs to be like student-centered. You need to have the student in the center and not the teacher. And then I see it as a journey from this, what happened, to finding a solution together. Because sometimes the whole class, if they have a let's say, recurring problem, this is coming over and over again, then maybe the class can help to solve it all together. And the idea of repairing harm and foster this responsibility. Some people think, I think they are, this is only what I think, that kids cannot take responsibility. And they should not, because they are kids and they should play and things like that. But still, you have to learn some moral responsibility, at least, for what is how it's okay to treat other and how you want to be treated yourself, things like that. But when you're promoting a sense of positive control over a situation, which might have been chaotic in the beginning, but you manage to turn it around to something that all parties understand, then I think it's a win-win situation. And I also think that in our societies, people are so afraid of conflict. But if you have a kind of like a healthy way of solving a problem, then we all learn something. And this is also how society can develop to be more peaceful in a way. And also, I think that shame and guilt, which are so common when we say, you are the wrongdoer, you did that, and you did that, and that's, then all of this, if we are not then allowed to talk about feelings and to talk about what happened inside of me when I felt those feelings, people will keep having them inside. And one day we say that something has been full enough, and then it explodes. So if we then in the beginning now of this, take this problem and we solve it at the time, so there is no guilt and shame left, and instead it transforms to fairness and to wisdom, then we also have a lot to win. So what do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, no, definitely. But what I am thinking of this as a good opportunity also, because I keep talking about that community feeling is missing in society. And I think to be able to first have these children think of it as themselves as a community. I think that, and then because it's a community, so we are doing this practice so that in some way we as a community work together and live together. Yes, because obviously we're going to be part of that. So is that actually a focus of the, or is just okay, now we are doing this circle and we are going to be talking about it, and then you break up and you go out into whatever. I don't know whether that community feeling is coming through that. So that was the whole idea of these restorative practices, that there were these communities who wanted to, of course, coexist. So they, of course, wanted things to be sorted out within the community. But is that aspect also coming out? I would really want to be interested to see that part.
I'm thinking a lot about communities, and I think like in the United States and in Canada, they have a lot of community mediation. I think we don't have anything similar to that in Sweden, but we have a lot of different institutions, and maybe part of those institutions are taking care of this problem, but they call it something else and things like that. But I think still it would be very healthy, both for the individual and for the groups and for communities to come together. For example, if you live in a certain housing area and there is one problem, you can say there is a playground and something is wrong with that playground, so it's dangerous for the kids. Why should the state take care of that problem if first all the people living in those houses could come together and figure out what has happened, and then try to figure out, okay, what do we need for our kids? How can we solve it? And if it was destroyed by somebody, how can we prevent people from, they need to be engaged in their own environment and in their own lives to be able to be inspired to do things like this. So I wrote once in my in an essay when I studied, I wrote, engagement is born when facilitated freedom is given, And I think you need to have this kind of voluntary freedom of choice to participate in something you participate in because it's important for you, to be able to foster that responsibility. And when you facilitate people in a circle, for example, I think that is one winning.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking from the children's perspective that they're part of a certain, say, society. I mean, I call it society for a moment. I won't bring in the community part, because if the community hasn't been created where they are, so that whole concept of their living, and now here in the school, you are putting across a method which they have not seeing around them. So to be able to, either are they going to take it into the community, or create communities, or is it going to be the other way around? They'll see it around them, and when they come to schools, they will think of this as something that is a normal way of going about it. That's the way people sit together and resolve things. So because I of course feel that now in this way things have happened, the children will go out and create those outside. But then it's that chicken and the egg situation, that if they don't see it outside, I mean, it's nice to see it in the school, and then they walk into this world where these adults are going about the life in a totally different way. So,
Exactly.
so
I
how
agree.
do you do that? What happens? Please, how do you think it's going to work?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that, but the kids that have learned this kind of conflict resolution, of course, they will use some parts of it in their own family. At least this is what the kids that we met told us. So that was something that nobody counted on would happen, but that had also been successful. They could not only being angry, but ask more wise questions, I would say, which opened up the discussion even around like family things. And of course, that's not the job of a child. Maybe therefore people are afraid of that the children should take too much responsibility. So of course, how do we teach adults? I don't know. I don't know. But I wish that I wish that I was also what is now the Michael Lang. He will be in the next session. He's talking a lot about reflective practice, and I am really fond of that. How to say concept. And as I said, none of us is perfect, but if we can try to reflect a bit on why we are triggered by certain things and how that is connected to maybe our own history, and if we can disconnect some fear around that and trying to be more authentic and accept ourselves as we are, with both the negatives and the positives. Of course, it's difficult. I know it's difficult, but then we could also meet other people with a little bit more calm mindset and not need to defend ourselves so hard. So I think those reflective practices is very beneficial.
Yeah. No, but going back to this aspect of the community and the children and that part, I feel that maybe the parents to be involved in it in some way. And of course, with the school administration, I'm sure they have issues. Can they be brought in that kind of a circle to be able to talk about those things? I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying that you can't in isolation do something with children and then they don't see that happening around them. If that sensitization of the parents and the teachers, because one is teacher being a coordinator in the process, the other is the teacher actually being able to imbibe those things and take it into their own community, because all of them are communities. So Michael is here. Hi, Michael.
Hi, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure.
Hello, Vikram. Hello.
Nina, my name is Nina Lindetal from Sweden.
And Nina has been for the last, I think, this session and otherwise also before that, been talking about Michael's reflective practice. She's new to even hearing about it, so now she's totally gaga about it. So she's a fan. She's a big fan now. Nina, you're a fan, and Michael is with you. So please, what do you have to tell him?
No, but I have been using, because we learned a piece of a reflective practice also in my education, and I have used it with both my students and participants, and with myself, and with people from my work as well. So I know that it's very, very powerful, but I also know that it can be fearful for people which have never done certain things. Oh, sorry, my electricity was nearly out, but now so for example, we had an idea of training working colleagues. They had to reflect every evening. So what did I learn? How did it affect me, I think, and how can it help me? Something like that. They got 3 reflecting questions that they should put themselves alone somewhere in the evening and think about. And then in the morning, we put them together in a circle, but we put them back to back. So they couldn't see each other. And we are used as human beings to be confirmed. When I say something to you, Vikram, I want you to like me. I want you to think that what I'm saying is very like smart and that, oh, that's an intelligent lady, things like that. So therefore we wait for confirmations like smiles and yeah, she's bright, things like that. But when we put people back to back, they are totally alone, but still people are sitting around and listening. And this was an idea of the supervisors I had at that time. But I found it very, very interesting. And over a period of 2 weeks, when we trained them, they grew a lot. Their self-confidence increased, maybe. And the whole group learned from each other, even if you could not answer. And yeah, I think we had a rule that after they were ready, you could ask like, can I please ask a question about that? But you could not judge, you could not say anything. I like that practice very, very much. What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I think it's fascinating. So these are mediators you're working with?
No, they are not. They're actually police officers, and they were trained going abroad for working in peace missions.
Oh my goodness, how fascinating!
Yeah, I love that practice.
It's extraordinary to hear that of your use with someone, because I'm accustomed to talking about the use of reflective practice with mediators, and I've read extensively about its use with nursing and other medical professionals, social workers and mental health, and teachers, even accountants, but never with police officers. So I'm absolutely intrigued. And I can, it's in my work, we primarily focus in a group setting. There's some individual work that I do occasionally, but the vast majority of my work is with groups where people are facing one another. They are interacting with one another, but with similar ground rules to yours. And that is that you can ask questions that encourage the person to think deeper about their experience, to question their own assumptions, or to explore for insights. But you can never second guess someone, offer your own opinion, offer advice, make judgments for the reasons that you say, that people, it will encourage people to trust one another, and it will strip away a bit of the natural self-consciousness that we have about saying something about ourselves. Because I agree with you completely, Nina, that what we want is validation. You know, we want confirmation that we are smart, effective, capable, all of those things. And that's not what a learner needs. A learner needs to discover for themselves the places where they have a growing edge, the things that they have learned. They learn to be able to question themselves, and you can only do that if you have a measure of trust. And I'm fascinated by the idea that one of the ways in which you build that is by having people sit back to back.
But of course, we did other things as well. We had icebreakers, and we had people coming together. They got to learn to know each other very fast when the training started, things like this. So of course, it was a whole concept, and it was also not only people from Sweden, it was many different nationalities. So I love that job.
So what we are going to do, Michael, here is first, it's been a long time. How have you been? We walk into my living room and we started you off on reflective practice, which is of course
No,
not
it's
the right.
fine.
How has,
We can do as much of that as we choose before.
how have you been? Main thing is that how have you been? It's been a long time. How's your wife, or how are things?
Um, uh, as it's being recorded, I will be circumspect.
We'll cut it. We'll cut the recording. Okay. So Nina, basically the topic of the one that Nina that session was restorative practices in schools. If there is something that you want to add to that, is there on that, Michael? Anything?
No, I
Okay.
have.
Perfect. Yeah.
I have very little experience with that. It just hasn't been part of my work over the years, but I'm fascinated by it, and believe that the real future is to begin working with children in schools.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd love to know more. I will watch I'll watch the video, Nina.
Yeah, we were just basically idea was basically throwing ideas, because Nina is saying she hasn't really worked with the schools as such, but she wants to work in this area because this is something very close to her heart. So we were just, I mean, it was just a general discussion around it, because it is a topic which it is important, like you said. This is where the future also lies. So Nina, do you want to kind of a closing kind of thing? You want to
No, just to explain to Michael that I was studying mediation and conflict intervention at Maynooth University in Ireland. So this is where I had this. I had this module with Michelle Stove. Maybe you know her because I've heard you've been there. Yeah, so she's fantastic, and she inspired me to start thinking more about these restorative practices in schools. I don't have any experience, but I have used it with people in general, and I have been a trainer for many adults, things like that. So I have used part of it, and I think it's when you disconnect the shame and the guilt part, and you transform that to wisdom and to good experience, I think you win so much. So I think we need this. Our society today needs this very, very hard. Yeah.
Good. So
desperately.
Yeah. So
desperately do it.
Desperately. Yeah. Good word.
So I think that's a good closing that you have given, Nina. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in. Of course, you're staying. You're not going. You're staying here. So thank you very much. And she's been quite active in the conference. She's been part of a lot of sessions and all that. So I think I don't know whether she's enjoyed it or not. I'm sure she's enjoyed it. I'll put words in her mouth.
I thought it was interesting. So therefore I said, okay, if this guy invites me, let's see what happens.
Vikram, you're very good at putting words in people's mouths.
Don't say that.
No, but they're usually good words.
Good words, yeah, good words. That's the whole idea. Good words.
And it comes from a good heart, which is also right. That's critical.
Exactly. I think, and people, understand and appreciate that. I think that's what I've seen. A lot of people tell me, "Oh, you spoke to this person about this. How come this person's still talking to you?" I said, because they know I come from the heart, so it's okay. So we'll say hi to Isaac after this. We'll just cut this session and we'll start the next one. Okay, Isaac.